Question number 11, Simon Watts.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Local Government. Did she receive advice from the Department of Internal Affairs on 25 October raising the possibility that the Honourable Eugenie Sage would pursue entrenchment of provisions in the Water Services Entities Bill via supplementary order paper and stating the government would need to decide whether to support it? If so, how does she reconcile that with her answer to me in oral questions on 6 December? We were made aware of the details of the SOP at the same time as he was.
The Honourable Nanaia Mahuta.
Mr Speaker, yes, I received advice from DIA in response to a letter received from the Honourable Eugenie Sage on the 20th of October 2022 that covered a range of their party's concerns related to the water reforms, such as stormwater, co-governance, funding and privatisation. I can reconcile this with my response to the member's oral question on the 6th of December because it was related more specifically to a matter foreshadowed in that letter and then subsequently set out at a later date and tabled in SOP 285.
Did she send advice received on SOP number 285 on 22nd November relating to entrenchment to any other ministers? If so, who?
Mr Speaker, that SOP was tabled by the Honourable Eugenie Sage in the House. It was a very dynamic debate. I saw that SOP at the same time and then subsequently sought advice on it.
Point of order, Chris Bishop.
That wasn't the question. The question was about the advice that the Minister received on that SOP and whether or not that advice was sent to other ministers.
Can you, that's not quite how I heard it, but if you, Simon Watts, if you could ask the question again, because I thought it was different to that, but where you go.
Did she send advice received on supplementary order paper number 285 on 22nd November relating to entrenchment to any other ministers? If so, who?
As I said, there was a dynamic debate that occurred in the House. I saw that SOP when it was tabled and then subsequently sought advice.
I'll give the member an additional question.
Did she receive advice on supplementary order paper number 285 on 22nd November relating to entrenchment? And did she send that advice to any other ministers?
Mr Speaker, the advice that I sought was in relation to the discussions in relation to an entrenchment provision at a threshold of 75%. In that regard, we did not have a provision within the bill as introduced because of decisions that were made at Cabinet.
Point of order, David Seymour.
Mr Speaker, it was a very reasonable question about advice received and shared on a particular day. The advice that the Minister was referring to occurred months beforehand. How can she get out of addressing the question of did she receive advice on that amendment on that day, and if so, did she share it with anyone? That wasn't remotely addressed.
Can the member ask the question once more?
Did she receive advice on SOP number 285 on 22nd November relating to entrenchment? And did she send that advice to any other ministers?
The advice, Mr Speaker, the advice that I requested and received was in relation to an entrenchment provision of 75%, and as I say, that is the advice upon which I acted on. The fact that Standing Order 270 enables a lower threshold of entrenchment to be considered was a matter for the clerk to determine whether or not it was in or out of scope within the context of the debate that we had.
Point of order, Chris Bishop.
Again, Mr Speaker, that just does not address the very direct and simple question that my colleague Simon Watts is asking. It just does nowhere goes to address that question?
Well, having heard the answer a second time, the answer covered the information that the Minister requested, which was different to the information that the member asked about. So the member can read into that whatever he wishes.
Who did she send that advice to?
Mr. Speaker, I acted on the advice, and to the extent that I sought advice in relation to the entrenchment provision at a 75% threshold, and acted accordingly. And the bill was not introduced with an entrenchment provision. In relation to SOP 285, we have already had the debate. A mistake was made. It has been rectified. We have the Water Service Entities Law without any entrenchment provision.
Point of order.
Point of order, Simon Watts.
My question was clearly, who did she send the advice to? I don't believe that question was answered.
She described it, but who does it get sent to? It's a very straight question he asked.
I'll ask the member to ask that once more.
Who did she send that advice to?
Mr. Speaker, in relation to the advice I received regarding a 75% threshold of entrenchment, there was no need to forward on that advice because we had already made a decision in relation to that particular matter.
Supplementary, David Seymour.
Does the Minister for Local Government stand by her statement just now that it was, quote, a mistake to support supplementary order paper 285 entrenching Three Waters provisions? Or does she stand by her statement to the Committee of the Whole House at the time that members had a, quote, moral obligation, unquote, to support it? What was it? A moral obligation or a mistake?
Mr. Speaker, we've rectified that matter. It was a mistake. It has been resolved. There is no constitutional crisis and there is no entrenchment provision on the Water Service Entities Law.
Supplementary. Why did she seek advice if she had already made a decision?
Mr. Speaker, that SOP was introduced by another member in the House. It was a very dynamic debate. It's not entirely the case that on every SOP that could be tendered by any member in this House that it wouldn't be debated or be considered in a very dynamic environment. In regards to SOP 285, an admission has been made that a mistake did occur. We rectified it. The Water Service Entities Law does not include an entrenchment provision.